So we will now proceed in our schedule here, and the next company is Biotech, and we have CEO Bent Frandsen here to present. The scene is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Aktiedagarna for again returning here to beautiful Stockholm and present Biotech. My name is Bent Frandsen. I'm the CEO of the company, and I will emphasize ES2B-C001, as it says here on the first page, which we boldly say will revolutionize breast cancer treatment. It's approaching the first clinical trial, and I'm going to describe that much more to you. Just briefly about the company. Biotech Holding AB is the public listed company on Nasdaq First North Growth Market here in Stockholm. It 100% owns Expression Biotechnologies ApS, which is the Danish subsidiary where all operations take place. That's where we have our technology platform that we call Expres, and where we work on our vaccine pipeline, and we also have a CRO services business. Importantly, we own 34% of a company called AdaptVac that we co-founded back in 2017 as a spin-out from Copenhagen University. They hold a technology called virus-like particle technology, or VLP technology. And that's a very important component of the breast cancer vaccine asset that I'm going to describe to you shortly. The Expres platform already has considerably proof of concept across all development stages in R&D. We are extremely proud that it's actually clinical phase 3 validated, as shown to the right. We developed a COVID-19 vaccine that was fully out-licensed to Bavarian Nordic, and they met the primary endpoint in a clinical phase 3 trial. It showed non-inferiority to Comirnaty, the COVID-19 vaccine from Pfizer Biotech, and thereby it validated the technology platform from Expression as well as AdaptVac, because it was also a combination of Express-made antigen coupled to a VLP. We furthermore have University of Oxford working on several different malaria projects using our Expres technology. They are in clinical phase 1 and 2, and last month in October we announced a term sheet with Serum Institute of India. They take an interest in 2 of these malaria projects and want to develop them to the market, sponsor the phase 2 and phase 3 trial, and so on. That's the world's largest vaccine manufacturer, so we're really happy that we have a foot in the door of that huge company. Furthermore, we work in earlier phase projects, and I'm going to highlight the ES2B-C001, as I mentioned here. And earlier than that, we have some infectious diseases projects as well, which I will not have time to cover in depth at this event. But when you look at our core pipeline that we fully control or semi-control, we show it like this. It's in that sense quite simple. We have a breast cancer vaccine asset in approaching phase 1. We filed the CTA, the clinical trial authorization, a few months ago, and we are eagerly awaiting the feedback from the authorities to get approval to start the first clinical trial. And we have a cytomegalovirus project, a CMV project, that we do in collaboration with another Danish biotech company, Evaxion, which is in the discovery phase. And we have spent time the last 2 years to come forward to a stage where we can select a lead candidate and bring this forward. And we have exploratory research where we take our scientific expertise and patent when we can, and hopefully can take something out here to expand on our pipeline. All of these addressing multi-billion euro markets. We have a very strong leadership team. Each leader has several decades of experience working with R&D, scientific affairs, and progression of products in the medicinal industry, even into the market. We have a board of directors, which is headed by Dr. Martin Roland Jensen. He was one of the founders of the company. Together, the leadership team and the board, we have more than 300 years of experience in bringing vaccines from the lab bench all through to the commercial stages. We also have a very important oncology scientific advisory board in this context, consisting of 6 high-level key opinion leaders in the field of cancer research. And I want to emphasize Professor Rupert Bartsch from this group. He is working at the Medical University of Vienna and has paved the way for us to file the clinical trial authorization to the Austrian authorities, and that's where we're going to conduct the phase 1 trial when we get there. So, speaking of breast cancer, it's a terrible disease, and it can affect 1 in 8 women during a lifetime. There are concerning statistics around diagnosis and even deaths in this disease area. And in 15 to 30% of cases, the disease is characterized by a protein called HER2. So when HER2 is overexpressed in your body, it can lead to an aggressive state of breast cancer, and it can lead to higher recurrence rate and increased mortality at the end of the day. HER2 is the target of the vaccine that we're working on. Across HER2 cancers, we look into a market with 1.7 million patients every year. We are, in first instance, looking at HER2 positive cancers, but we also have, in discussions with the authorities from Austria, the right also to work on HER2 low cancers, which is good. And we have seen some preclinical evidence that we can also target gastric cancer, where HER2 is also highly prevalent, especially in Asia. So looking across HER2 positive, HER2 low, gastric cancer, that's how we envision we are going to expand the market potential with this. And there are other HER2 expressing cancers that we can target into. And then in the long term, we're talking about a therapeutic vaccine in first instance. So patients will have been diagnosed with the disease, and then we use our vaccine to hinder recurrence or resistance to standard treatments. In the long term, we hope for prophylactic vaccine using this approach. And our vaccine is designed exactly as we designed our COVID-19 vaccine. We make the antigens, which are shown here on the surface of this structure, in our Expres technology. We couple these antigens on a virus-like particle using this technology from AdaptVac, and thereby we have a unique form which is very easy to produce and very consistent, and basically we've seen evidence that it works. The concept of using a VLP like this is already in commercially available vaccines. So HPV vaccines, which I'm sure you are familiar with, there are vaccines called Cervarix and Gardasil from Big Pharma. They use the same concept. So as I mentioned, it makes a vaccine very efficacious, highly immunogenic. It's highly safe in this manner, and there's a longevity parameter which is very, very important, that we can show an effect that is long-lasting, and you can combine it with standard of care and basically have an off-the-shelf, scalable and cost-effective vaccine. We have, over the last couple of years, made a compelling preclinical data package. This is just a snapshot of some of the preclinical data that we have, where we have investigated the outcome in mice. To the left, you see a therapeutic mice model where these mice will be inoculated with, or challenged with, tumors from day 0. And then we see how it evolves in 3 groups, where they get our vaccine with an adjuvant as shown in the red, or without an adjuvant as shown in the green. Combining it with an adjuvant is very normal and standard in the vaccine. Vaccines apply adjuvants. In this case, we see when applying an adjuvant, we have basically 0 development of tumors looking at these mice in that group. Whereas if you don't use our vaccine, you will see the mice getting strong tumor growth. To the right, you see actually a preventive mice model, where these mice are transgenic, so they're disposed for development of tumors, and in the control group, they will die at day 60. But those who actually get our vaccines with an adjuvant, they survive across 600 days, which is remarkable considering the lifetime of a mouse is less than 2 years. So this is what we cling our hopes to, so to speak. We find it very compelling, and we look forward to evidence this also in a clinical setting. Looking at it across competition, there are monoclonal antibodies, antibody-drug conjugates, and tyrosine kinase inhibitors. These are the standard of care treatments against breast cancer today. They come with some drawbacks on the safety side. The first 5 rows here show various safety issues with the known standard of care treatments. We have not observed any of this in our preclinical setting, and of course that's what we also are going to look into in our clinical stage. Standard of care resistance, very important. Up to 1/3 of patients may develop resistance, meaning they will not get any benefit and the disease may recur. And we have actually seen very strong preclinical evidence that we can hinder recurrence. Furthermore, we've seen the long-term effect, and it's very easy to administer, and it's VLP-based and very cost-effective. Going forward, as I mentioned, we've spent some years doing the non-clinical package so far, and we're now on a very important point where we filed the clinical trial application a few months ago, and we are awaiting the feedback from the Austrian authorities as we speak. And as we announced when we filed the CTA, we expect the trial to start here in Q1 2025. That's certainly still the case. Going forward, we already have to look into what goes on after a phase 1 trial where we've documented the safety. Then you want to obtain a clinical proof of concept showing efficacy as well. And that's also my reason for talking about this, both to investors and to potential partners, because we want to have that value creating milestone when we get the proof of concept in a clinical setting. And we want a partner to take over when it comes to the phase 3 and the commercialization of this asset. We see some very important milestones here in the short term. Right now, obviously, we are approaching the year end, and we are also approaching getting that CTA approval. It's a critical milestone in terms of regulatory approval, so we can start the clinical trial. During 2025, we, of course, will investigate how it works, and I'm sure we will be able to provide some updates on the clinical phase 1 trial. It's a trial that will last 12 to 18 months, so we expect the trial results to come in 2026, which can be a gateway, as we call it, to licensing or partnering activities. It's always good with clinical evidence when you move into business development on such an important asset. And it's also important for us to move into the clinical phase 2 going onwards. Right now, as we speak, we have a TO10 warrant subscription window going on. It started here on the 20th of November and it ends on the 4th of December. And if you find this interesting, of course, I encourage you to look into our warrants and get some shares for the current price of 17.91. And there's another one program. Both of these are part of the rights issue that we did earlier this year. The TO11 will be triggered in September, October next year. And we see this as a way of financing our clinical activities and the company going onwards here to address the future value drivers. And I would also like to emphasize that the value in this is immense. It's really high value market we are talking about, and we have seen deals in this space which are multi-million worth of euros, and that's the space we are stepping into, getting into the clinical phase now. So just to summarize, we are developing a HER2 VLP vaccine. We call it ES2B-C001. And we're targeting HER2 expressing cancers, and in first instance, breast cancer. This is actually a 27 billion euro market with high growth over the coming years. We have a very strong preclinical data package, and it's all been submitted to the authorities. So now we're waiting for the approval to start the clinical phase 1 trial. And we are very committed to getting this further ahead so we can get into the high value phase of our clinical phase 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Just as a first question here, you have a, so to say, for a small company, maybe a broad portfolio of different candidates. Is it hard to manage them all as a CEO, or how does it work?
Well, we focus on one oncology asset with multiple indications granted, and then several infectious diseases vaccines. But most of the infectious diseases vaccines, which I didn't have time to present here, we're talking about malaria, influenza, and Nipah virus. They are more or less funded by non-diluting funding from grants from the EU and other sources, and they are coordinated in various consortia, which really doesn't require full CEO attention, to be honest. So it's managed in these research groups. My main focus is really to bring the breast cancer vaccine forward.
That is the pinpoint focus, so to speak. Regarding, as you mentioned as well, you first submitted your clinical trial application for breast cancer here. Can you tell us more about the milestone? Any timeline in place right now, or can you give us some more detail there?
Yeah, well, I think the time started when 6th of August we submitted the clinical trial authorization to the authorities in Austria. That coincided with their summer break, and they need to validate if it follows the right format. We use a so-called CITES format, which is a new EU system for filing such documents, and they returned 2nd of September to say, okay, you fulfill the criteria for submitting a CTA. So that's when the clock started in reality. And then there are phases where authorities, usually it's very standard, they have some requests for information, as they call it. We've had that in 3 instances the last couple of weeks, months. And when that happened, the clock stops, and then we have a certain period to respond to them. And there's nothing unusual in any of these questions. So that's why I'm very comfortable in this reaching to an approval. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. You mentioned here when we started talking about malaria a little bit, and you communicated a pretty big milestone here that you reached an agreement with the Serum Institute in India. Regarding this, can you give us any more insight to that collaboration, what you hope it will generate for you? And
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a term sheet that we announced. So right now we're in a phase so we can make a definitive agreement, a final agreement on this. And it basically grants Serum Institute of India the right to use our Expres technology platform to manufacture and commercialize these 2 malaria projects out of that. And as I mentioned, the Serum Institute of India is the world's largest vaccine manufacturer. They have a presence in more than 170 countries around the world, including US and the EU. And they actually produced and distributed more than 2 billion COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic. So I'm really excited that we have a foot in the door with that company. So, of course, the agreement is within malaria. So we have communicated we will get some milestone payments and we'll get some royalties. But we've also communicated it's lower milestone payments and it's small royalties of sales. That's how it works. But I think the most important thing is the blue stamp from getting an agreement in place. That will make us very proud, and we'll see. Then we have a dialogue with them.
Yeah, exactly. It might work as a door opener for further more business and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think if I've seen correctly, you communicated that you were at the Biostock talking to potential partners or something. Can you give us some insight there? How was the receiving from the other partners there?
Sure, that's correct. I was recently at BioEurope, one of many events that we go to every year to describe what we do to potential partners. It's a big company dating market where you have your profile as a company and with your assets described, and there's a good opportunity to match with companies who fulfill the same criteria. So that's how it works. So I can say that I'm able to raise eyebrows with what we work on, right? And that's why I'm eagerly wanting to get this into the first clinical phase so we can start generating some clinical data on the breast cancer vaccine asset, because then it becomes more partner ready. But I've also said the highest value, and that's really for any biotech company, you want to have the clinical proof of concept, which is the end of clinical phase 2. But you have to face reality and see if there's discussion and an attraction from the big pharma company or whoever the partner could be to buy into such an asset at an earlier stage, and maybe it's worth it.
And as you mentioned a little bit, you raised some capital in the summer, if I remember correctly. How long are you funded right now? And do you see, you also talked about the warrant offering right now. How long are you funded, and how long will the money take you, so to speak?
Yeah. You can never really comment exactly on the runway, so I cannot do that. I mean, and the TO11 warrant program, which is exercisable in September, October next year, also fell into this. But we have we have money to get far with the phase 1 trial.
Thank you. And just like a finishing question here, why should the investor take a closer look at Expres2ion Biotech as a next potential investment?
Well, we've discussed here or presented the revolutionizing breast cancer vaccine asset. It's a one-of-a-kind vaccine approach that can hinder resistance and potentially give the long-term treatment to breast cancer patients. That's a very strong one. Then we have the malaria vaccines, which are being out-licensed and can generate future revenue with the world's largest vaccine manufacturer. And I haven't really touched that much on our platform and the exploratory research, where we're working on also exciting things in our labs that are unique as well. So
I think a message then is, if you're more interested, check in their website and read more about the other projects as well. Thank you so much for presenting here today and answering all questions, and we'll be excited to follow you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.